Well, hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Some very familiar faces, some unknown names and faces as well, but good to see you all. Thanks for coming. So we are here for up to 90 minutes today. As Kat's just said, we're going to be recording it. There will be an opportunity to go into breakout rooms at one or two points. So the conversations in the breakout rooms will not be recorded, but just be mindful of anything that you might share afterwards, because I'd love to hear a little bit about your conversations from the breakout room in the space when you come back. But those will be recorded, obviously. So just be mindful of confidentiality of anything that you might have been discussing with the people in your groups, and that you're happy for it to be shared, because it will appear outside of this space. So what are we doing here today? Well, I'll come on to that in a minute, but really this is lunch and learn. So I imagine some of you might actually be eating lunch. I haven't had lunch yet, so that makes me very jealous to think that you might be doing that. I'd like it to be interactive. I've got some information and some views to share, but I'd like it to be interactive. If you've got a question that you would like to ask at any point, I sometimes don't see the chat function very well when I'm delivering. So there is if you look at on your screen, the reactions button, there is a raise hand function, and that then throws you up to the top of my screen. So that might be the way to grab my attention, or you can throw something into the chat box, and hopefully I might see it. So yes, I'm a coach, a supervisor, a mental coach for the ICF as well. I work with people one-to-one and also in groups for that. I also helped to design the presence module on the Animas Diploma in Transformational Coaching. So I suppose in some way I should know a little bit about this competency. I don't know whether I do or not, but I will share with you my experiences and what I sort of think about it as we go along. Before we get going, I'd love to know just a little bit about each of you. So if you were able to, in the chat box, just let me know where you are today. And also, what are your personal weather conditions? So how are you feeling? And how would you describe that in terms of the weather? So are you feeling sunny? Are you feeling as if you're in a thunderstorm at the moment? Or maybe it's clear and bright, or it's drizzly and grey. How are you feeling in terms of a weather forecast? King of presents. Thank you, Tracy. We shall see. Foggy in southeast London from Helen. Thank you. We've got a bit of foggy. Cloudy but sunny later. Oh, lovely, Marie. That's great. Hamburg. Yeah, so I say it's lunch and learn. Of course, that really depends on where you're calling from. Might be in the middle of the night for you, for all I know. Luxembourg. It's rainy and hazy, misty in the Cotswolds. Drich in Glasgow. Drich. Have I pronounced that right? I'm not sure. Sharon, you might let me know if that's right. Stockholm, Sweden. Feeling like cold but sunny autumn day. Electric in Surbiton from Karen. Electric, fantastic. Mellow and autumnal and a foggy and a promise of sun later. Great stuff. And a little bit of fog in France from Julie. Brilliant stuff. All right. Quite a lot of fog. And it is lunchtime, isn't it? And it's early in the week. So maybe we might provide a bit of clarity and clear some of the fog surrounding this competency, perhaps. So I think I'd also just like to ask you to consider how present you are feeling right now, and present to the topic that we're talking about, present right now to the experience that we're having. How present are you able to be? And maybe just consider what you might need or how you might need to be so that you can be as present as you can be to get the experience that you would like from today. All right. So I'm going to just, what am I going to do? I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation. We will be putting a PDF of this into the LinkedIn room, resources room whatever it's called, Kat will put it in there, I'm sure. So let's just have a quick look at what I'm hoping we're going to cover today. Quick introduction to the competency and to presence, followed by an overview of the ICF competencies and credentialing. Some of you may have been party to conversations previous to this on the previous Lunch and Learns and may already have heard about this. So that'll just be a very quick run through of that. Then I'm going to take a look at where the competency sits within the framework of the ICF competencies. What does the competency actually say? And what's it trying to get at? How might we best demonstrate this competency in our coaching? So for some of you, you might be here interested in becoming credentialed with the ICF. And one of the things that we might do then is have to demonstrate to the ICF that we understand the competency and that they can see it clearly demonstrated in our coaching. Some of you might already be credentialed, and then it's about how do we maintain our professional level and how aware are we of the competencies within which we should be working if we want to be ICF professionals. Some of you might just be curious about what might be ahead for you if at some point you choose to go down the ICF path and become credentialed. What does the ICF have to say about it? And then also I've got a quick look at how that competency varies between the 3 different credentialing levels that you can obtain. ACC, so for many of you that might be where you are or where you're heading, Associate Certified Coach, through to PCC, Professional Certified Coach, which is where I got to finally this year, through to MCC, is it Master Certified Coach, which I'm 55 years old, going on about 80. And the amount of coaching I do, I think you have to have something like 2,500 hours or something. It's like that will be posthumously awarded to me. I simply do not do enough coaching currently to get to MCC, but some of you might have that in mind, and I can give my view of what that might take. And then some final tips and thoughts around the whole thing. And why are we here today? What are we doing? Well, simply put, we are exploring one of the 8 ICF updated core competencies. And on a quick look, this one's simple, isn't it? There's only 6 points to it. It's very straightforward. And I think there's a tendency sometimes with these things to think, oh, I can tick this one off, I can move on, I can do that presence thing, I can do whatever it is. I can listen actively, that's all fine, and just move on. But I think personally that presence, and I think what this competency is attempting to achieve, goes to the very heart of how our way of being as a coach is fundamental to establishing and maintaining effective partnerships with our clients. And it runs through everything we do. And what is presence anyway? I mean, the ICF here, I think, are trying to define behaviors and characteristics of our coaching sessions that allow us to demonstrate our ability to maintain presence with our clients, because this is competency 5, maintains presence, which I think assumes that we have presence and that we can then maintain it throughout individual sessions and entire coaching relationships. But how would you define presence? And I think there's a tension here that exists for me because there's just being aware that there's a list of competencies and that we're trying to meet them in some way and demonstrate that is likely to move us out of presence. And I think perhaps, I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on about this, couldn't I? And it's probably not particularly helpful today. But in defining presence, I think sometimes it's useful to look at the opposite of presence, which the dictionary definition of the opposite of presence would be absence. And what would the potential impact of that be in coaching if there was a sense of absence from us as the coach? And I think just quickly, I know when I'm at my best and in presence with my clients that I am in some way allowing myself to be me, allowing myself into the coaching space. And, you know, that's not particularly helpful either for today. It's like, how do we define that? And we're all different, and we're all different human beings. And then there's that word being. It's like, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And I think that also goes to presence. It's how are we and who are we as coaches, not so much what we do as coaches. It's how we are being in the space. And And finally on this, I think personally, I believe that our natural state is presence, but that we often get taken out of presence by everyday life, by things that might happen in the coaching session that distract us or trigger us. But fundamentally, if we go back to the humanistic foundations that guide us through coaching, we're all creative, resourceful, and whole. We already have everything that we need in order to become the best versions of ourselves. So this sits within that our natural state is one of presence. Anyway, that's enough of that. I've banged on about that for too long. We're here to look at the ICF meanings and definitions. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at that. What are the core competencies? Well, they were, I mean, there's some text there. I mean, basically, this is for the ICF to try to define and encapsulate how they see coaching and how they see coaches behaving, and within what framework would we like our coaches to be acting and working with clients, understanding skills, behaviors, approaches within this profession, and try to get some consistency and reliability that runs through for the protection of our clients and also for the protection of us and for the good of the coaching profession and its reputation. And it also ties in closely, if you're thinking about credentialing, with the definition of coaching that the ICF give us, and also the code of ethics. So those are two other things that tie in to this. And the definition of coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. I actually really like that definition. And you might see in the paragraph above this thing about the coach knowledge assessment. These competencies were used to create the coach knowledge assessment. What on earth is the coach knowledge assessment? Well, just very quickly on credentialing, if you choose to become credentialed at any point, then the coach knowledge assessment is the final piece of the puzzle in terms of what you need to do. So very quickly, looking at the pathway to becoming a credential holder, I'm looking here at ACC. And this is it's very complicated, but this is the ACSTH pathway, which if you did the Animas course or a course similar to that, this is the pathway that you would be looking at, where you need to get at least 60 hours of coach-specific training. You can check on the ICF website whether your program provider was accredited in the right way. You then need 10 hours of mentor coaching, and those 10 hours can be either one-to-one, or they can be in a group. 7 of them can also be in a group environment. They have to be over a minimum period of 3 months, and your mentor coach must be credentialed with the ICF. So there's various things to look into around that. And you have to undertake a minimum of 100 hours, at the moment 70 of which are paid, of coaching experience. That has to be with, I think, at least 8 clients following the start of your training. And a certain number of those hours must be within 2 years of your application, things like that. So again, there's more detail around that to look into. Then there's a performance evaluation, submitting a recording, an audio recording of a coaching session that you think meets the standards they're looking for, with a written transcript. And then when that's all been assessed, and they're taking an awful long time, between 16 and 18 weeks at the moment for that process, then you will be notified if you've passed, and sent a link to do this coach knowledge assessment test, which is an online multiple choice test, takes about 2 or 3 hours, and then after that you will then be notified of whether you have passed or failed that. So that, just a bit of background, if you were looking at credentialing, that is the process that you have to go through. And there is a link, and in fact I might be able to can I grab that link? Let me see if I can grab that link for you. This is the ICF website. And if I pop that in the chat box, actually their website is, was a little bit confusing, but it's actually pretty good on credentialing. So feel free to have a delve around there. All right, where are we? Where are we now? So I think let's take a look at where the competency sits. And this is a little diagram that I actually created, which shows all of the competencies in one go. And there's 4 sets of competencies. There's the foundation, there's co-creating the relationship, there's communicating effectively and listening actively, and then cultivating, learning and growing. We are in the second one of those at the moment, co-creating the relationship, and this is maintaining presence. So that's where we are. And I think it's just important to recognize that none of these sit in isolation. And in particular, the maintaining presence, number 5, I think is closely linked with number 2, which is embodying a coaching mindset. And also number 4, cultivating trust and safety. So just be aware that none of this sits in isolation. This isn't something you can go, yep, maintains presence, ticks. There's lots of things that also happen elsewhere. And presence runs through everything, I think. And part of this competence assumes, as I said earlier, that you're already in presence with your clients, and we're maintaining presence. So maybe, well, no, not maybe, I'd definitely be interested if you would like to share, what do you do currently, maybe ahead of a coaching session, to get you into presence, to be with your clients? Do you have any particular practices or anything that you would do ahead of a session just to ground yourselves and settle in? And if you've got anything in particular that you do, just chuck it into the chat box. I'd love to have a look at that. All righty. Thank you. Natalie, focused meditation and breathing, mindful breathing. Yeah, putting on music, reading through my notes, 5-minute meditation, meditate, engage with silence. So a lot of breathing, silence, meditation. Read through the notes, Karen. Yeah, so a familiarization of where we were last time and who the client is. Space before the meeting, consciously giving yourself time. Breathing and counting, backward counting. Oh, lovely. Actually, backward counting. Tanya, would you, I hesitate to ask you into the space, but if you'd be willing, maybe you could let me know how that helps you. I'd love to know.
So backward counting from 10 to 1, but along with breathing, followed with breathing. So it's like 10, 9, 8, 7, and then reaching to 1, breathing, consciously breathing, and that until then. So it just helps you to center yourself and reach a particular point.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, lovely. And maybe gives you a bit of a rhythm to your breathing as well if you're counting.
Yeah. It helps you disconnect with whatever you were thinking, whatever you were doing, and then you're just in that moment. Yeah.
Okay, and that reminds me of something I saw Brene Brown do with breathing, where she said, imagine that you've got a 4-sided cube, and when you breathe, it's literally draw the cube. So breathe in and hold until you've drawn that side, and then breathe out as you bring your hand down that side, and then breathe in and then breathe out. And that sort of gives a rhythm to it as well. So it sort of reminds me a bit of that. Thank you very much for sharing. Going for a walk, brilliant, Will. Yeah, I do walking coaching with some of my clients as well. So I walk to Dorking and then meet my clients and then take them up over Box Hill. And that can be great. Quiet and alone time. Oh, you have a mantra. Fiona, do you have a particular mantra, or is this a mantra that you would create just before the session?
No, Marcus, it's because I'm new to coaching, and I worried about what my clients would potentially bring to the table. So I have to remind myself that it's okay to feel nervous. So I spend the time sort of trying to make myself unnervous. And my mantra to myself is, it's a conversation, you cannot break it. And I take that into me because I feel the fear. So I feel the fear and do it anyway. So within 5 minutes of sort of knowing what after we've had our initial discussion, and then the client tells me what they'd like to think about in the session, I've calmed myself down. But until that moment, I have to just keep saying that to myself.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think that there's something really important in there around, we might think, okay, we need to get rid of nerves. We need to get rid of anxiety. But actually, that is our felt experience in any moment. And actually, being part of being present is being alive to that. knowing that. And maybe sharing some of that, because when we're in a session with our client, if we're truly present, we're able to notice what's happening, not just for our clients, but what's happening for us. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? It might not mean anything, but it might mean something. It might mean something, most importantly, perhaps to our clients. And can we find a way that shares that without any kind of assumption, and give it to them to look at and see? So I think, Fiona, that's great. It's like being able to recognize. I think that's a big theme for today, is recognizing the state that you're in, and working with that to make sure that you are okay to go into the session and be with your client, even if you're still feeling a little bit nervous and anxious about that. I was nervous about this session coming in today, and so I had to notice that. And mainly due to, I was saying to Kat, mainly due to a lack of preparation. I seem to have spent my whole life in the training room for the last 4 or 5 days, and didn't really give myself enough time to prepare as I would like for this. And so it's like I came in sort of like this. But anyway, that's enough of that. So lots of different ways that we might prepare. Backward counting and Amandine, thank you. Backward counting engages the left side of the brain, and since both the right and left brain can't work at the same time, it automatically reduces the cognitive process from the right brain. It's the same principle for focused breathing. All right, lovely. There's a clear explanation of that. Thank you, Amandine. Great. So there's this idea that we can prepare for presence and go in the best state that we might be, and we can build that presence and build a presence-based relationship with our clients. But how do we maintain that? And particularly in terms of the ICF, what is it that they have written, and what do they mean, and how might we demonstrate that? So let's take a look at each specific point here. And see what we might think of those. So there's a definition, and the ICF define this competency as is fully conscious and present with the client, employing a style that is open, flexible, grounded, and confident. And I think those 4 states and qualities run through the 6 competencies that are here. How open are we, and how flexible are we? Are we able to dance in the moment with our clients whilst also attending to the client's agenda throughout the session, but noticing when shifts are taking place? So we're flexible enough to notice that. Are we grounded? How grounded do we feel in ourselves? I mean, there's various interpretations of that, but what comes to mind for me is things like being well balanced, being mentally and emotionally stable, sensible. I don't know what that means. That came to me. Being sensible. I don't know what that means. Able to maintain professionalism and focus on whatever is happening, and however your client is, despite whatever might be happening in the session, you can maintain that wrapper of professionalism and focus and care for your client. So let's have a look at each of these. I'll have a little discussion about them. And then I would love, we'll have time, I think, definitely to put you into breakout rooms to have a quick discussion. So the first one of these remains focused, observant, empathetic, and responsive to the client. Well, there's a lot in there, isn't there? And we have to reminding ourselves, as far as the ICF is concerned, for credentialing, but also for ourselves, if we are reflecting on our own coaching, then in some way we have to know whether this was true or not. So how might we know this? We need to be able to stay focused for the ICF so that we notice things. We notice our clients' words, their behaviors, their emotions, the patterns that might come up in the language, for example. And we're able to respond to what is noticed. We are responsive to the client, and the client will feel that, allowing the client to feel the focus and response in a way that they feel heard and understood. That's where the empathy comes in. And I think ultimately what we're hoping to do is to allow them to feel that they're accepted for who they are, and certainly not judged. So that's what comes up for me around that one. Demonstrates curiosity during the coaching process. Demonstrates curiosity. Now, there's that word, demonstrates. And we've also got curiosity, which is probably a well-known word to you in relation to coaching. I'm sure that you've heard that word used: remain curious, remain open. And I think it is a desirable state. And I think perhaps we want to explore the type of curiosity that we're looking at here. Because for me, there's more than one. And if I think about something like active curiosity, there can be a drive and a purpose behind our curiosity. It's like a thirst that needs to be quenched. That active curiosity is going to activate that part of the brain that anticipates a reward for doing something. Now, it can enhance learning, but I'm not sure that it's particularly helpful within coaching, where perhaps we're looking for a more open curiosity, the type of curiosity that isn't driven. It doesn't need an answer or to be satisfied. This curiosity doesn't need to be satisfied. It's open to any possibility. And it can look without any kind of judgment or evaluation or worry or anxiety. It's just open curiosity. Whatever happens, whatever comes of this is going to be okay. And I'm really genuinely curious to discover what that might be. And it's paradoxical because it's open to understanding, but also to not understanding. It's open to, in fact, it doesn't need to know anything, but it can do that. You can sit with confusing and upsetting things and vague things. You can ask questions about them with an open mind, and you're ready for whatever response comes. And if no answer comes, it doesn't feel like a problem. You can just ask another question. So I think there is something really fundamentally important for us as coaches about demonstrating open curiosity. Okay, number 3 here: manages one's emotions to stay present with the client, and also demonstrates confidence in working with strong client emotions during the coaching process. So for me, those two sort of sit together, even though in one we're talking about our own emotions as the coach, and with the other one we are talking about having confidence to work with our clients' emotions. And I think here it's probably reasonably obvious to see that we wouldn't want our own emotions to become overwhelming for us or off-putting to our clients. We can be triggered out of presence. Our state can become such that we are no longer truly present with our client, and we're focusing on something that's happening for us, or demonstrating behaviors which might be difficult or off-putting. There's something about being able to remain calm, to be aware and to understand your emotional responses. So self-awareness is a bit of a key here. And that then when you're aware of what might be happening for you, that you can manage that in the moment. And it's also important for our clients to know that it is safe for them to be able to express whatever they're feeling or thinking, however strongly that might be, that this is a safe space for them to do that. And if they do, that we can continue to hold them, remain supportive and compassionate, but also objective, to remain objectively compassionate in the space and supportive. They will continue to feel held, I think, if they are becoming emotional. And it's important for them to know that. Otherwise, I think it's likely that they won't. And then if that's not allowed into the space, what are we doing if our clients are holding something back that might be important for them to be able to express? Great stuff. Derek, a question. I find myself very curious and ask clarity questions often. This is great for connection with the client and serves to improve my knowledge of the client's paradigm. However, it can break the cognitive flow and thinking. Do you have any thoughts on this? Thoughts that come to me right now are that I think there is a paradox in all sorts of things with coaching, and things that potentially could break our presence. And I think the question I would ask myself, possibly Derek, here is, for whom am I asking this question? Am I asking this question for myself? And if I am, is it important that I have this clarity right now? Or am I asking this question in service of my client? And I think there can be a difference there. I also think generally that that lots of things can distract us and disturb our presence. You know, that the knowledge of models, as I said earlier, even just this competency, trying to demonstrate things like that. But in relation to seeking clarity, I think sometimes it's worthwhile, sometimes it's important, but I would just be checking in around whose curiosity it is that I'm aiming to satisfy. Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Derek. Good question. All righty. So just a quick check-in with you guys around that emotional response and self-awareness. What do you do to increase your own self-awareness? You're all coaches here. I would imagine, that's an assumption, isn't it? But I would imagine that most of us are coaches here. Thinking about improving and increasing your self-awareness, what kind of things do you do currently or aware of that you could do? Supervision, supervision, supervision. Brilliant. It's a bit like location, location, location. Supervision. Yeah, absolutely. Get a supervisor. What a brilliant way to learn as a coach. Self-reflection. Yeah, absolutely. Listening back to recorded sessions. That's a brilliant way of reflecting because there's nowhere to hide. You're going to hear it all and you're going to see things that you weren't aware of in the session. Reflecting, post-session reflection and supervision, self-reflection, listening. Oh, great. Lots of themes. Yeah, brilliant. I think reflection and self-reflection and reflection through supervision can be brilliant. And also doing recorded sessions in supervision. So if you've got a supervisor who could listen to recordings and then you can reflect together on what actually happened in the sessions. And yes, writing down reflections regularly. I'd also say get a coach. I think generally speaking, invest in yourself. If you are looking to be professional and serious about the work that you do, invest in yourself. Invest in a coach, invest in some supervision, invest in self-development. What are some of the courses that you might do, some of the books that you might read? So don't forget that it's an ongoing journey. And I would say, adopt a state of constant learning and become a reflective practitioner. But some great suggestions there. All righty, where have we got to? Is comfortable working in a space of not knowing? Oh, it's marvelous. I could get all spiritual here. And I just think this thing about working in the space of not knowing is key. But how do we do that? It's a really difficult thing to do because we also think we know, and often we think we've got the answers for our clients, and we think we know where they should be going. I think this is very closely linked with curiosity, that active and open curiosity that I talked about. If we're actively curious, then we're wanting to know, or we think we might know, and we're confirming something. But if we're openly curious, then we don't care, actually. It doesn't matter if we know or not. And fundamentally, where does the responsibility for success in coaching lie? It's not up to us as coaches to have the answers, or to know the answers, or even to need to know the answers, or even to need our clients to know, or to achieve, or to get there. That is not our responsibility as coaches. And so we can even get to the stage where it shows up in our sessions because we're desperate for our clients to achieve their outcomes. Now, we can support them and help them to that and do all of our brilliant work, but fundamentally the responsibility for that lies outside. And when you get that, then you can let go of so much stuff. What if you turned up into a session knowing nothing? I mean, literally, you knew nothing. How pure would your coaching be then? I mean, you might want to know how to talk, I suppose. That might be difficult. So you might need to know something. But if you knew nothing about your client or what they were talking about, just how pure would that be? And try and adopt that space of no knowledge and be okay with it. That's the other thing. We have to be okay with that. Have to be okay with that. And then the last one, creates or allows space for silence, pause, or reflection. I mean, this is easily demonstrated. I think this is possibly the easiest of all of those to actually demonstrate as far as the ICF are concerned. And that there's something about this coming from a place of genuineness, and you're not just doing it to demonstrate the competencies, but it's connected to the purpose of the session as far as the client is concerned, and not just, again, ticking a box because the ICF ask us to do it. So that there's a way of being at ease, slowing down, not rushing anywhere, and being able to demonstrate that congruently and authentically in the session. And we'll talk in a minute about the differences between ACC, PCC, and MCC. And so a little sort of heads up example of where some of those differences might lie is that at ACC level, they might expect to see that, but that it might be clunky, and there might be a sense that you're putting some silence in there, and it's not well matched with your client, but you're aware of what the competency says, and you're trying to demonstrate that. Through to MCC, when you're not even aware of what the competencies are. You don't have to be. It's just who you are. And so that's the kind of difference that we are talking about between these competencies. And so I think, just as a wrap up for this, and then I'm going to get you into breakout rooms, 2 words stand out for me here: comfort and confidence. And this is in the main in yourself. Comfort in yourself, confidence in yourself. How can I become more comfortable in my own skin, that I can demonstrate this quiet confidence maybe in who I am as a person, as a coach, as to what we are doing here today, not in any kind of ego-based way, not verging on arrogance, but that kind of comfort and confidence that just helps us to maintain presence with our clients. So what we're going to do now is pop into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. So I'm going to get Kat to organize that. So again, just be aware that your conversations won't be recorded when you go off. I'd love to hear a flavor of your conversation when you come back, if you're willing to share just a little bit of that. Is there anything else I should say? What are we doing in the breakout room? That might be helpful, mightn't it? So I think, because I've been an assessor myself at Animas, that often you notice things when they go wrong. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that you're an ICF assessor listening to a recording of another coach's session. What is it that you might notice in that session that would indicate the coach is out of presence? And in relation to the competency that we've just talked about. So what is it? In relation to those competencies, how might a coach be demonstrating that they are out of presence? Okay, what kind of things might show up? All right. So we're going to have 10 minutes for you to have those conversations away from me banging on at you, which might be nice and peaceful. And then we'll come back and have a quick chat about that before we move into ACC, MCC, PCC, and all the other CCs that we can think of. Good. Any questions from anybody before we disappear? Okay, lovely. I'll put the question into the breakout room as well. And we'll see you back here soon. Wonderful. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So you've had, hopefully, some conversations. You might even have talked about presence while you were in there. Who knows? So I'm hoping some of you might have done that. So we've got a little bit of time just for anybody who would like to share, to give us a flavor of your conversation, bearing in mind what might we observe in a coaching session if a coach is not in presence with their clients. Who would like to share? Karen.
The thing that came up for me off the back of a recent client session would be if the coach was showing emotions that were not conducive to the coaching session. So I recently had a session planned, and I explained to my group, I have teenage daughters, there's always a bit of drama going on in the house. And so I'd had to intervene in this drama, and I had to then take myself off for that half an hour before the coaching session to ground myself. Now, I believe that if I hadn't have had that time, if the drama had continued right up to 5 minutes before the session, I wouldn't have been in the right state of mind. So it's about having that we came to the point in the group of saying, having the self-awareness to know if you're able to serve your client, if you're in the right state of mind. So if you were observing someone who was not emotionally in the right state, that would be
right.
the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you think that might come across?
I guess that could be, you could maybe read on the face that there is emotion there. Maybe they've been tearful, maybe depending on what they've been doing before the session, or very distracted, maybe looking at the time, fidgety, things like that.
All sorts of things like that. Brilliant stuff. Great. Thank you, Karen. Derek.
Hi, thanks, Marcus. I guess we talked about how presence and building a human connection is particularly important in the initial stages of a client engagement. You know, session 1, 2, you need to build that relationship. Obviously, you need to maintain it, but you can be a bit more challenging once you've built the relationship. Some of the challenges we talked about were the use of all of these damn tools that animals have taught us, right? You know, and bringing them in too early is probably a bad idea because it can appear very mechanistic. And it can break that relationship. I also have a question for you about that because I've been doing some training outside of Animas, and a US-based, leadership-based process is very tool-heavy and very metric-heavy, and that feels a bit unnatural to me. But I can put a question to you later about it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and there is definitely something there, isn't there? If you're learning new techniques and that you're having to hold them consciously in your mind and you're not familiar with them, taking your mind to something like that, if you're doing a model or a technique, can just distract you from what's happening right in front of you. But it can also be really useful to be using those models. So how do we get to the stage where they are more second nature to us, that we can incorporate them in a way where they seem to fit more naturally into our coaching sessions and our coaching sessions flow better, and that we don't feel restricted perhaps by those models, but we are using them truly in service of what's happening here now, with using our presence. And so that, yeah, that's, I think to say, well, because what I used to say to myself was, well, I don't know whether it's worth learning all of those models, because actually I can just sit with somebody and have a conversation with them and be present. But actually taking the time and the effort to practice some of those techniques, when they do become second nature to you, then they can be really useful. So I think for stuff that resonates with you, it's really worth doing that. Yeah, that question around other types of perhaps coaching and US-based performance leadership coaching. There's all sorts of different types of coaching out there, aren't there? And I wouldn't say that anything here is right or wrong. And I think certain techniques we might use with people could be very useful. But let's just remind ourselves in this frame today within the ICF, although some of those things fit within the ICF competency as well. So there's a spectrum of work that we might do, and at one end you might have somebody who turns up into coaching sessions with no notes, doesn't review anything, comes in fresh and clean, works with the client, leaves, and that's it, and is just totally present with their client in that moment. You might come at the other end of the spectrum with somebody who has specific techniques that they use in certain situations, and they have a program that they might use with clients in certain situations, and all of that can fit on the spectrum of who we are as coaches. So more than one thing, I think, can exist at any one time. And of course, what am I doing here? I'm talking to you about my version of what presence might be. And that's not necessarily going to completely resonate with you. And you've got to find your own way to become you in the coaching space.
Thanks, Marcus. Just one last point.
Derek.
I have to say that the Animas tools are great.
Yes.
They really are. So thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Derek. Sam.
Yeah, building on that idea of a spectrum of a kind of being comfortable with polarity, we spoke quite a lot about either reflecting not enough or reflecting too much. That reflecting actually served to keep you present because it meant that you were paying attention to the key points. But where that reflecting started to become excessive and used too many details and focused on things that slowed down the pace of the conversation, it no longer was serving the client.
Oh, lovely stuff. How would you know then that you were doing too much of that, do you think?
I guess it would just be a sense or a feeling that you weren't in sync together with one another.
Yeah.
We didn't get that far, to be honest.
No, but it's an interesting thing to just think about, isn't it? I think often, particularly in this competency, it's often a feeling or a sense that something's just out of kilter. And I think where we've been working with somebody for a while, it can be easier to notice that. I think in the early stages of relationships, when you're finding your way with people and building presence and rapport and trust, that can be harder to see, and you're finding your way. Yeah, the felt sense of the relationship, and talk to your clients, of course, as well. We can do that. What is their sense of it, not just our sense? Lovely, thank you, Sam. Joanne.
Yes, thank you. So we were contemplating empathy and presence, and it was interesting because we were talking about if a client was, for example, to demonstrate a strong emotion, and as a coach you sort of were aware of that, but then you felt discomfort within yourself and kept trying to move past that, so you're not being present with yourself. And then there's also presence then with the client, that you just simply haven't picked up on the empathy at all, on the emotion at all, and you're just sort of changing direction. So we were just considering the presence within the two areas, with the client and with yourself as well.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Noticing all of that, and those are things that might well show up for an assessor when they're listening or watching a recording. Those kind of things can happen. Yes, a discomfort for you as the coach, and moving past things could show up as well, almost ignoring what's in the space, not noticing things. And of course that might not be true. You might have noticed it, chosen to move past it because of your discomfort. I think it's really interesting to think about. Thanks, Joanne. All right, lovely stuff. It is 2 o'clock, so let me share my, no, that's not right. Share my screen. That is okay. So what do we, what do the ICF say? What do they say? And there's a little bit of this is reading between the lines. A little bit of this is also having looked at some videos that the ICF have got on YouTube around the competencies. So if any of you are interested in seeing some of the ICF coaches who help to create these competencies talk about what they mean to them, then just be aware on the ICF YouTube channel, there are some videos there. You might find a few of these words on those videos, because I have watched them. So what do they say? And I simply put, what they are talking about is that this competence is all about our ability to simply be with another human being. And while we're with them, to be open and flexible without attachment and with confidence. And there's that confidence piece again, not doubting ourselves, and just being with our clients, knowing that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Not being attached to any particular outcome, even the client's outcome. It's like, let's not be attached to the client's outcome, and being open and flexible and curious and empathetic and all of those things. And when they talk about being out of presence, so I think you picked up on some interesting things. The things that they talk about are, you might be rushing to solutions too quickly. If they observe that you're trying to rush the session along, get to the meaty bit, the outcome, then that is for them a red flag or a warning sign. Not being comfortable allowing space and silence, or pressing the client, a sense of urgency for answers and solutions. Showing a lack of curiosity. What does that look like? Well, maybe, and this was mentioned earlier, adopting more of a checklist approach, getting stuck into a particular model and doing it in a checklist way, or having a procedural style of coaching that doesn't flow and go with the client and be flexible. So you're being rigid and inflexible. And an example of this that we see quite a lot is dragging the client back to the outcome that they talked about. So we've got clear about what the outcome in a session might be. For those of you who've done some of the earlier competencies, it's like, start well in the session, get as clear as you can about what the outcome is for the client, and allow them to know how they'll have achieved it by the end of the session. What are the measurability things that we're going to agree, so that you'll know whether you've achieved it or not. And then we attend to the client's agenda throughout the session. But if we attend too rigidly to it and drag them back because they've dared to wander off track and talk about something else, but no, you can't talk about that. You've got to come over here. This is what we're talking about. Then that will be shown to be rigid and inflexible, because we're going to notice that. And we're going to give the client the choice about what they want to do about that. And it may be that the outcome has shifted for some reason. And so being flexible in the space and not attached to the outcome means that we can notice that, share that with the client, and decide how we might move forward. Being unresponsive or not noticing, and Joanne talking about perhaps that might be deliberate. It might be deliberate, the fact that we're unresponsive, or actually is it because we're just not noticing things and we're too caught up in our own heads? Coming across as nervous or hesitant might be an indication of a lack of confidence in self, and that could impact our ability to be present. Becoming defensive, being triggered by something our clients might say, taking it personally in some way, becoming emotionally involved in the session and becoming defensive. It might be a clear indicator that we're not managing our emotions particularly well, or we're not aware of what's actually happening for us in the session. Okay, let's take a look at what the ICF, at least some of my thinking around and some of their thinking around, well, what are we aiming for here at ACC? If I'm aiming for, I've completely lost what I'm thinking about. If I'm aiming to demonstrate that I am maintaining presence, I've got this number 5 buttoned down at ACC level, or if I'm going for PCC, or if I'm going for MCC, what are some of the differences that the ICF might be looking at? And generally speaking, what I'd say here is, for any of you looking to go to ACC, is that the ICF are relatively forgiving at that stage. They want you to have an understanding of the core competencies, and to a certain extent to be demonstrating them, and certainly not doing any of the direct red flag work like stepping in and advising or judging your clients. But then there's an emphasis around the amount. You know, this is based on experience. You will have done around 100 hours of coaching by this stage. You haven't done 2,500 hours. You haven't worked as a coach all your life. So there is a variation in the expectation depending on where you are. Now, just to be aware, there is a table available on the ICF website which compares the various levels. This has not been updated for the new core competencies. However, as your friendly mentor coach, I have updated this table. So just be wary that it is based on my interpretation of the ICF, doesn't come from the ICF directly. But I would hope it at least gives us a flavor of this. So the competency, we've on the left-hand side there, we know what it is. We've talked about that. In essence, it's about the coach's ability to be with another human being. So that's that same quotation there. At ACC level, what is it the ICF are expecting? I think, based on past information and my understanding, that they are looking for you to attend to the client's agenda, but that you might be attached to your own performance. You might be showing a bit of nervousness and lack of confidence, and your presence might be diluted by your attention to yourself. You're aware of yourself in the space and concerned about how you might be doing, where we're getting to, what your client might think of you. Not to the extent that you are incapable of performing, but that it might be a bit noticeable in the space, and that you substitute some thinking and analysis for presence and responsiveness some of the time. And their view on what would fail you at this level is if you're demonstrating significant interest in the coach's view rather than the client's view of the situation. You don't seek information from the client about the client's thinking around the situation. You just accept everything that is said. And maybe collude in that. The coach is unresponsive, we've talked about that, to that information, and doesn't seek information about the client's goals regarding the situation. Unresponsive to that information. And the attention seems to be on the coach's own performance or demonstration of knowledge about the topic. So, you know, they say that it's okay to be aware of self in the space to a certain extent, but there is a limit over which you will then be demonstrating you are out of presence, and that's going to be a bit of a red marker. So that's where we are at ACC level. It allows you a bit of latitude. I think at this level, understanding what the competencies are, being conscious of them and working to incorporate them in your coaching is great. And it's quite simple, actually. Listen to your client. Be genuinely curious about what are they going to say next? What are they going to think next? I don't know. So be really open to the possibility that they could say anything, and allow them to speak and talk. Do a bit of reflecting back so that you are seen to have heard, and be flexible and responsive during the session. Check in the middle of a session. Do that. How are we getting on? So when you came into the session, you were talking about this, and this is the goal that we identified. Since then, we've talked about all sorts of different things. Where do you think we are in relation to your goal? How are you feeling about your goal now? What would you like to do with the time that's remaining in our session? Those kind of questions really allow, you want to make this easy for the assessor. You want to make it easy for them to go, yeah, that's fine. You don't want to be raising flags for them that they then start to lose confidence in you as a coach. And, oh, this is just general advice, but start well. Start well. And then probably the assessor will go off and make a cup of tea and have a quick kip while the rest of your session's running. And then they'll come in and listen to the last 5 minutes. If you start badly, then they're going to be listening to every word you say. All right. Okay. PCC level. I think, I mean, you'll get these slides, have a look at them, see what you think. There are certain differences here. So they will attend to the client's agenda. They will choose objective or subjective perspective, but rarely hold both simultaneously. So you're not going to be objective and subjective at the same time. It'll evidence the need to have direction, blah, 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 blah. So there's lots of things there. If we look at what will not receive a passing score, there are two things in addition to ACC level that they're talking about. So rather than being present and responsive to the client, the coach is overly reliant on an obvious coaching formula or a specific tool or standard coaching question. So that's really showing up here, that they at this level are asking you to have had enough experience to start to let go of those rigid frameworks that you have been using in the past, less rigid questions that you ask every client every time, and it feels procedural rather than natural and flowing. And the coach doesn't allow the client to contribute to creating the method or the way that the coaching session will evolve. So this is about co-creating the session with your client at the start, not setting out the agenda and how it's going to work and this is what we're going to do, but actually co-creating the session with the client and demonstrate that, and co-creating throughout and at the end as well, co-creating together what will happen next, and being interested in the learning that the client is taking at the end of the session. And then MCC level, which is, as I say, only to be awarded posthumously in my case. So I'm never going to get there. What do they say about this? And for me, this is about, as I said earlier, the difference between being really consciously aware of these competencies and trying to bring them in, compared to I am just present. It's like it's my whole state of being. It is completely natural to me to be here with my client, potentially demonstrating those competencies without even knowing what they are. I don't have to even think about that. And the session feels natural and it flows, and there's a complete connection. And it says here, the connection is to the whole of who the client is, how the client learns, what the client has to teach, all of these things. And then there's three things in addition here that might fail you, in my opinion. The coach does not treat the client as a full partner, choosing not only the agenda, but also participating in the creation of the coaching process itself. There's any indication that the coach is teaching rather than coaching. I mean, any indication. So I suppose that would indicate that if there was any indication at ACC or potentially PCC, that might be okay, depending on how much of that there is, but not a chance at MCC level. If there's any indication that you're being the expert and trying to impart knowledge and teaching, that is a complete no-no. And the coach does not allow the client to help to develop coaching tools for themselves, and instead relies on standard coaching formulas, tools, or questions. Like, I'm not bringing anything in here. I'm going to allow my clients to create this. I'm there to help them. We might co-create, but actually I'm letting go. I'm letting go of this. And what emerges into the space will be what emerges. And it will be helpful for the client in some way, that kind of mindset. So I think quite a different mindset to where most of us might be, including me. So that's a little a look ahead potentially for some of you about what is aspirationally ahead of you if you're looking to move through the competency levels. All righty. So where are we? 30. I need to move along. Some personal tips here for presence. Get out of your own way, for God's sake. Goodness me, we're the ones who are actually going to sabotage the coaching session mostly, not our clients. Your client isn't going to be thinking about you. Think about when you've been coached. Most of the time, you're not going to be thinking about your coach and how good they are, unless you yourself as coach are thinking that and bringing that energy into the space. You're going to bring that on yourself. Get out of your own way. Learn how to become more comfortable in your own skin. How do we do that? I think practice and experience helps. Maybe who do you know who you would say is really comfortable in her own skin? Can you think of anybody who you would say and you know of? And what do they do? What could you learn from them potentially? How could you aspire to be like that in your coaching? Become comfortable with your own vulnerability. Yeah, well, it's a big one, isn't it? But I think that for me is an important one. The work of Brené Brown, if you've not come across her, is very informative and interesting in research around vulnerability and shame. Becoming comfortable with not knowing. Aim to be surprised. Set an intention that you will be surprised in the session and open your minds up to that possibility. And let go of your need to achieve the client's outcome as the mark of a successful session. Your need. And ultimately then, if the client gets their successful outcome, great. If the client doesn't get their successful outcome, great. That's it. And there are a couple of quotes here, one from Carl Rogers, which I think is quite informative here. In my early professional years, now bear in mind he was a therapist, I was asking the question, how can I treat or cure or change this person? Now I would phrase the question in this way. How can I provide a relationship which this person may use for his or her own personal growth? Now there's a very different emphasis to that. How can I be a tool of change and just create this relationship that allows change to happen for that person? And then Rumi, the Sufi poet, says, out beyond our ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Oh my God, I always get emotional when I read that quote. It's just like, oh my God. Oh, if I could meet my clients in that field, how wonderful would that be? Oh, just love that. That I think, yeah, that's pretty much it, apart from banging on about myself, which I might do at the end if we have time. But just before then, I would love to know from you guys, maybe just take a few moments to think about this. But what are you taking from today for yourself? What can you take from this session for yourself? And obviously, if anybody has got any last minute questions as well about anything that we've talked about today, now is the time. So maybe pop your hand up, the virtual hand, if you've got anything you'd like to share about what you might be taking with you from today, or if you've got a question. Di, hello.
Hi, Marcus. So nice
Hi.
to see you again. Hi
And
there.
you?
So one of the words I've been listening for today, and I don't know if I've heard it, is intuition.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, let me share something on intuition. And this is a last piece actually, and this is around why might working with presence actually benefit our clients. And one of those, I think, is that it allows access to our natural intuitive state, our instinctive wisdom, if we're truly in presence. If we can put everything else aside and be present with our clients, then we are able to access our intuition. That's what I think. And I think from a very simple perspective, in that state, we can ask ourselves, or our clients can ask themselves, what is the next right action, and get an answer that is in alignment with who they are and where they want to be. And so I think part of the benefit of working this way is that our state allows our clients to move to presence themselves. And I think often that gets forgotten, that our state will impact our clients. And if our natural state is presence, as I said at the beginning, then part of the work that we might be doing is inviting people to come back to presence from wherever they've been. And particularly in this moment together, the two of us, how can we be present with each other to allow you to come back to presence, to come back to who you are? It's like this, this is beyond the ICF core competencies for me, but it's like the very essence of the work we're doing is to allow people to come back to who they truly are. And fundamentally, that is where we are. Any situation a client brings to us is likely to be up here and situational. We're not going to ignore that. But I think often, particularly at a transformational level, we're going to be working to bring people back to presence, to the essence of who they truly are as a human being, and allow them to see the situation from there. And so therefore, in essence, something that we can do with our presence is to invite our clients to become to presence themselves and access everything that goes with that. One of those things, Di, thank you for reminding me, is definitely our intuition. Not just our intuition, but inviting our clients' intuition, wisdom, and creativity into the space as well. So is there anything you would add, Di, to that?
No, I use my intuition more and more, and the more I coach, the more I value it. It's just something wonderful, and it develops because one starts trusting one's own intuition. Yeah, so exciting. Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, and what an amazing thing, isn't it, when you learn to trust your intuition? And there's the word courage, which hasn't been brought up today as well. It's like the courage to put something into the space when you start to learn your intuition, but the courage to bring it in and see what happens, such that it then becomes a flow. It's almost like a flow, and it's like you can leave a session and think, I can't really remember what was going on there, but something was happening. And that flow of intuition, if you find a client that you can work with like that way, is an amazing thing. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Sandy, hello.
Hi, Marcus. Yes, I was thinking partly from something that came up in our group and partly because of the two quotes that you gave at the end and the relationship, but also the space. I mean, what is the space? The space is beyond duality, as Rumi quite rightly points out. And so when we take ourselves out the way, there's more ability to be so fully present that there's just this space and whatever evolves from that. And obviously it comes out in words because we're human beings, but it's when that is happening, sort of, I wouldn't like to call it magic, but something shifts in the client because of the quality of that space. And that they're just so supported that they can go beyond whatever limitations they're in. So they're not caught up in duality. They're just completely in a space of freedom to explore without their own judgments getting in the way or anything. I think I've explained it clearly enough.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, there's so much to this topic that, that can't be explored possibly within the confines of the ICF core competencies. But what I'm taking from what you're saying there is What else is happening? You use the word magic. Yes, it is magic, I think. It's like, what happens when two people are together? You've got you've got the client, but you've got the space between and the space beyond, and everything that goes on. And having a felt sense, feeling into not just your client and yourself, but what's happening between you. There's magic in there. There's magic, we can talk about all sorts of things like limbic resonance, the scientific approaches to know that mammals between them will sense certain things. A scientific principle, and there's a resonance of energy potentially. We'll notice something. Now, of course, as coaches, we're not going to make any assumptions about what that might be, but when we're really in tune and we notice things like that, then we might share something, and who knows what comes up as a result of that. That's what I took from that, Sandy, but I'm sure there's other stuff that's involved in there as well. So thank you for sharing. All righty. God, I'm feeling overexcited. I need to go and have a cold bath, I think. Derek.
I may just pop in before you get into your bath, Marcus.
That'll be my second of the day. I'm like Ricky Gervais. I've got to have at least 2 baths a day.
You're not too far. Just a quick one on what you see as the benefits of ICF accreditation and ACC, PCC, and MCC.
Good question. So my thing on this is, well, you don't have to do it. There's no reason unless there's a reason for you to do that. And I think in my experience, I work as a coach one-to-one with people and not in companies or corporate environments. I've never been asked by any of my clients about whether ICF whether I'm ICF credentialed. I've been asked by 2 of my clients in all these years, I think, whether I'm qualified. But there may well be situations where you are asked. And I think often, and more so these days, companies, charities, organizations are more likely to be seeking information about your qualification and your progress. So it's possible, more likely in those environments. And so doing it is never going to do you any harm. And actually, I think the process actually these new competencies are well designed. And they allow you a framework within which to measure your coaching and to reflect. So I think the process of doing it can be a really positive experience, and it's never going to do you any harm. You may have a specific reason. The reason I ended up getting credentialed at ACC level was because Animas asked me to be a trainer and I had to be credentialed. And so there was a specific purpose. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'll do that. I put a tick in the box and that'll be great. But actually, I felt quite, uplifted by it. I thought, oh, actually, I've done something purposeful. There was a purpose to it. And of course, there's a level of credibility that comes with that. I think it shows a dedication to your craft and a desire to improve and progress. So for me, I guess those, personally speaking, are probably some of the reasons, but there may be other reasons for you individually. I don't know.
That's helpful. Thank you, Marcus. Enjoy your bath.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, I think I'm going to have a warm bath and just open the window rather than a cold bath. I mean, honestly, why would you have a cold bath? All right, look, it is nearly past, and I'm sure you've all had enough of me banging on. So just very finally, I'm always open to a conversation. If anybody wants to chat at any time about anything, dogs, electric mountain bikes, anybody got any of those? We bought some of those. Fantastic. Yes, Melanie. Brilliant. Changed our lives. Anyway, yes, I do coaching one-to-one and group. I do training and facilitation with Animas and other organizations. I've done some training with More Happy. Some of you might have had the misfortune of being in a training room with me at some point. I do coaching supervision individually and group work. And of course, I do ICF mentoring and I run a group. So one of the possibilities, as I said earlier, is that you, instead of doing 10 hours with one person or with various people individually, you can be part of a group environment for 7 of those hours. And so Emily Johnston and Natasha Harris, both involved with Animas as well, and I got together and we run groups. We've actually got one starting tonight, and we've got another group, I think, starting in February. So if you're curious about any of that or want to know anything more, then there's my details. My email address is there. There's also a Calendly link. Oh yeah, you'll get the PDF. So if you want to reach out, I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn. and I'm around the Animas community as well. So, so just for me to say thank you very much. I've actually really enjoyed today. I hope it's been useful for you, and I hope you can take something of this from today's session into your coaching. And I hope to see lots of you around in the future. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kat, for organising and facilitating.
Thanks so much, Mark.